Sarah Chun had perfected the art of being forgettable. In the sprawling corridors of the Brookfield Federal Research Facility, she moved like a ghost among shadows, her cleaning cart's wheels barely whispering against polished concrete floors. For 6 years, she had been the invisible woman who emptied trash bins filled with shredded documents, mopped floors where classified conversations echoed, and sanitized workstations where America's brightest minds developed technologies that could reshape the world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But when encrypted signals began pulsing through communication networks at 2:47 a.m. on a cold February night, the quiet janitor would reveal knowledge that could only belong to someone who had once intercepted enemy transmissions in the world's most dangerous cyber warfare operations. The Brookfield Federal Research Facility stood like a fortress of glass and steel against the Virginia countryside, its imposing structure housing some of the nation's most sensitive scientific and intelligence operations. 23 miles southwest of Washington, D.C., the facility operated under the administrative umbrella of the Department of Energy, but its true purpose extended far beyond civilian nuclear research. Within its secured walls, teams of scientists, engineers, and intelligence analysts worked on projects that officially didn't exist, developing technologies that would never appear in public records. Sarah Chun began her shift each evening at exactly 10:30 p.m., arriving through the employee entrance with the same unremarkable routine she had maintained for over 6 years. At 31, she possessed an understated presence that seemed designed to deflect attention. Her black hair was always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the standard-issue navy blue uniform that marked her as maintenance staff. Behind wire-rimmed glasses, her dark eyes held an alertness that seemed incongruous for someone whose job description involved emptying wastepaper baskets and disinfecting laboratory surfaces. The facility operated on a strict clearance hierarchy: red badges for maintenance and support staff, blue badges for researchers and technicians, gold badges for project leaders and senior scientists, and black badges for the intelligence personnel who moved through the building like phantoms, their true identities known only to a select few. Sarah's red badge granted her access to common areas, laboratories after hours, and the administrative sections where she performed the bulk of her cleaning duties. Her cleaning cart was a masterpiece of organized efficiency. Specialized cleaning solutions for different types of laboratory equipment, industrial-grade vacuum attachments for computer areas, and secure disposal containers for documents that required incineration rather than standard recycling. She had requisitioned additional compartments over the years, explaining to her supervisor, Frank Morrison, that proper organization improved her efficiency and reduced the time needed to complete her rounds. Frank Morrison was a good-natured man in his 50s who had managed the facility's maintenance operations for over a decade. He appreciated Sarah's reliability and attention to detail, often commenting that she was the most thorough cleaner he had ever supervised. What Frank didn't know was that Sarah's thoroughness extended far beyond sanitation protocols. As she cleaned each area, she unconsciously cataloged details that most people would overlook: the positioning of computer terminals, the types of documents left on desks, the subtle changes in security procedures that might indicate shifting priorities. Within the facility, the night shift suited Sarah perfectly. During evening hours, the facility transformed from a bustling center of scientific activity into a quieter environment where she could work without constant interruption. The day shift researchers and administrators departed by 7 p.m., leaving behind only security personnel, a skeleton crew of technicians monitoring ongoing experiments, and the night maintenance staff. This reduced population meant fewer people to observe her movements, fewer questions about why she seemed to understand the facility's layout and operations with unusual precision. Dr. Elena Vasquez was one of the few researchers who regularly worked late enough to encounter Sarah during her cleaning rounds. A nuclear physics specialist in her early 40s, Dr. Vasquez led a team developing advanced reactor safety systems. She had noticed that Sarah seemed to have an intuitive understanding of laboratory protocols, always knowing which areas to avoid during active experiments and which equipment required special cleaning procedures. Their interactions were limited to polite greetings and occasional small talk, but Dr. Vasquez had formed a positive impression of the quiet janitor, who maintained her workspace with such professional competence. The security staff at Brookfield consisted of both uniformed guards and plainclothes personnel whose presence was more subtle but equally vigilant. Captain Marcus Webb, the evening security supervisor, had observed Sarah's work patterns over the years and appreciated her consistency. She arrived punctually, followed established routes through the facility, and completed her duties without deviation from approved procedures. Her security record was spotless, with no incidents, complaints, or unusual behavior patterns that might warrant additional scrutiny. Sarah's apartment in nearby Arlington was as unremarkable as her professional persona. A modest one-bedroom unit in a complex that housed other government employees, teachers, and service workers. Her neighbors knew her as a quiet woman who kept to herself, occasionally exchanging pleasantries in the hallway, but rarely engaging in extended conversations. The apartment's decor was simple and functional, with generic furniture and minimal personal items that revealed nothing about her background or interests. What her neighbors couldn't see was the sophisticated equipment concealed within seemingly ordinary household items. A coffee maker that contained signal monitoring components, a bookshelf that housed encrypted hard drives behind false panels, and a bathroom mirror that could display real-time data feeds when activated with the correct biometric signature. These modifications were so subtle that even a detailed search would likely overlook them, the result of training in tradecraft that few people possessed. Each evening, as Sarah prepared for work, she followed a routine that had become second nature. She reviewed news reports and intelligence summaries through encrypted channels, checking for any developments that might affect the facility's operations or security status. This information gathering wasn't part of her janitorial duties, but rather a habit from her previous life that she had never been able to abandon completely. The drive to Brookfield took her through Virginia countryside that remained largely undeveloped despite its proximity to the capital. During winter months, the landscape was stark and beautiful, bare trees creating intricate patterns against gray skies. Sarah used his commute time for reflection and mental preparation, transitioning from her civilian identity to the carefully constructed persona she maintained at the facility. Her relationship with her supervisor, Frank Morrison, was cordial but professional. Frank appreciated employees who performed their duties without requiring constant oversight, and Sarah's reliability had earned his trust over the years. She submitted maintenance reports that were thorough and accurate, identified equipment problems before they became serious issues, and maintained cleaning standards that consistently exceeded facility requirements. Frank had recommended her for commendations and pay increases, viewing her as one of his most valuable team members. The other maintenance staff members were a diverse group of individuals who shared little beyond their employment at the facility. There was Miguel Santos, a day shift janitor who handled the administrative areas, Jennifer Walsh, who specialized in laboratory cleaning protocols, and David Kim, who maintained the building's mechanical systems. Sarah's interactions with her colleagues were friendly but limited, partly due to their different schedules and partly due to her natural tendency toward privacy. Dr. Vasquez had occasionally wondered about Sarah's background. The janitor's understanding of scientific equipment and laboratory procedures seemed more sophisticated than typical maintenance training would provide. She had also noticed that Sarah appeared to read technical documents with genuine comprehension, not just scanning for cleaning instructions. These observations had created a mild curiosity, but Dr. Vasquez respected personal privacy and had never pursued the matter beyond casual interest. The facility's computer networks operated on multiple levels of security, with isolated systems for different classification levels and research projects. Sarah's maintenance access allowed her to clean around computer workstations and server areas, but not to interact with the systems themselves. However, her years of working in these environments had given her an intimate familiarity with the facility's technology infrastructure, knowledge that extended far beyond what her official duties required. As February deepened into its coldest weeks, Sarah had begun noticing subtle changes in the facility's operational patterns. Increased security briefings, longer hours for certain research teams, and the arrival of personnel she didn't recognize carrying the black badges that indicated intelligence assignments. These changes weren't dramatic enough to attract general attention, but Sarah's trained eye for operational security recognized the signs of elevated alert status. On this particular February night, as she prepared to begin another routine shift, Sarah had no way of knowing that her carefully maintained anonymity was about to be shattered by events that would test every skill she had acquired during a previous career that officially had never existed. The quiet janitor who had spent 6 years perfecting the art of invisibility was about to discover that some secrets were too dangerous to remain hidden, no matter how much she had sacrificed to keep them buried. At 2:47 a.m., Sarah was cleaning the third-floor communications wing when the first anomaly appeared. She had been sanitizing workstations in the signals intelligence section, moving with her usual methodical precision through cubicles filled with sophisticated monitoring equipment. The area was always particularly sensitive, requiring specialized cleaning protocols for the delicate electronics that processed intercepted communications from around the globe. The anomaly manifested as a series of rapid beeps from one of the monitoring stations, followed by a cascade of similar alerts across multiple terminals. Sarah paused, her cleaning cloth suspended mid-motion as she recognized the distinctive pattern of incoming priority transmissions. The sound was familiar in a way that made her stomach tighten with involuntary recognition. Dr. James Peterson, the night shift supervisor for the communications wing, emerged from his office with a puzzled expression. Peterson was a career intelligence analyst in his late 40s, responsible for overseeing the facility's signal monitoring operations during off hours. He approached the alerting terminals with the measured concern of someone accustomed to technical glitches, but Sarah could see tension in his posture that suggested this wasn't routine equipment malfunction. "Interesting," Peterson muttered, settling at one of the workstations and beginning to access the incoming data. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, but Sarah noticed a slight tremor in his hands that indicated stress. Beyond normal operational concerns, Sarah continued her cleaning routine, but her attention was divided between her official duties and the subtle signs of crisis developing around her. Years of intelligence training had taught her to gather information through peripheral observation, maintaining her cover while cataloging details that might prove significant. The pattern of alerts, the frequency of incoming transmissions, and Peterson's increasingly agitated responses all painted a picture of something far more serious than routine intelligence traffic. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The transmissions were encrypted, but Sarah recognized elements of the communication protocols from her previous career. The routing signatures suggested multiple sources, possibly coordinated through different geographic regions. More concerning was the urgency implicit in the transmission scheduling, with messages arriving in rapid succession rather than the steady flow typical of normal intelligence gathering operations. Peterson made a phone call that lasted less than 30 seconds, speaking in the careful language of someone discussing classified matters over potentially monitored lines. When he hung up, He immediately began accessing higher-level security systems, his clearance allowing him to decrypt and analyze the incoming intelligence in real-time. Sarah moved to the next cubicle, positioning herself where she could observe Peterson's computer screen without appearing to do so. The reflected images in the darkened windows provided enough visual information for her to begin recognizing the structure of the intelligence reports he was reviewing. What she saw made her blood run cold with a familiarity she had hoped never to experience again. The reports contained fragments of intercepted communications discussing nuclear materials, transportation schedules, and target assessments. Individual pieces of information that might seem routine to someone without the proper context, but which formed a terrifying pattern when viewed by someone with Sarah's background in counterterrorism intelligence. Peterson's phone rang again, and this conversation lasted longer. Sarah could hear the tension in his voice as he described the incoming intelligence to whoever was on the other end of the line. Terms like credible threat assessment and immediate verification required, filtered through his careful professional language. As Peterson continued his analysis, Sarah found herself unconsciously shifting into assessment mode, her mind automatically processing the intelligence fragments she was observing. The targeting data suggested a domestic operation rather than international terrorism. The timeline references indicated planning in advanced stages. Most alarming were the technical specifications that suggested access to weapons-grade nuclear materials. Dr. Peterson stood abruptly and walked to a secure communications terminal in the far corner of the room. This system was isolated from the general network, used only for the most sensitive intelligence communications. As he activated the terminal and began transmitting reports to higher authorities, Sarah realized that the Brookfield facility had just become the focal point of a developing national security crisis. The secure terminal required biometric authentication and multiple encryption keys, protocols that Sarah recognized from her own experience with similar systems. Peterson's access level was clearly significant, allowing him to communicate directly with intelligence agencies and emergency response coordinators. The gravity of his reports was evident in the speed with which he was escalating the information. Through official channels, Sarah's cleaning duties required her to move through the communications wing systematically, but she found herself lingering near areas where she could continue observing the developing situation. Her training had emphasized the importance of maintaining operational security even during crisis situations, but the potential implications of what she was witnessing made it difficult to remain passive. Additional personnel began arriving at the facility earlier than their normal schedules. Sarah observed security officers conducting unscheduled patrols and noticed that certain areas of the building were being secured beyond normal protocols. The response pattern suggested implementation of elevated threat procedures, confirming that the intelligence Peterson was processing represented a genuine emergency rather than a training exercise. Dr. Alana Vasquez arrived unexpectedly, her presence in the communications wing unusual given her typical focus on reactor safety systems. Sarah watched as Vasquez was briefed by Peterson, observing the physicist's expression change from confusion to alarm as she was brought up to speed on the developing situation. The fact that reactor specialists were being brought into the intelligence assessment suggested that the threat involved nuclear materials in a way that required immediate technical expertise. The pattern of personnel arrivals and security modifications created a picture of coordinated emergency response. Sarah recognized the organizational structure from her own experience with crisis management operations. Key specialists were being assembled, security protocols were being elevated, and communication channels were being established with external agencies. The response was too rapid and too comprehensive to be anything other than reaction to a credible and immediate threat. As the night progressed, Sarah began to recognize specific individuals among the arriving personnel. Dr. Michael Torres, a nuclear weapons specialist whose work was classified at the highest levels. Agent Patricia Williams from the FBI's Counterterrorism Division, Colonel Robert Hayes from Military Intelligence. The assembly of this particular group of experts suggested a threat assessment involving domestic nuclear terrorism with potential military implications. The intelligence terminals continued to process incoming data, and Sarah could see that the volume of information was increasing rather than diminishing. Multiple intelligence sources were apparently reporting related information, creating a comprehensive picture of whatever operation was being planned. The coordination required for such extensive intelligence gathering suggested that multiple agencies were treating this as a priority investigation. Sarah found herself in an impossible position. Her janitorial duties provided her with access to intelligence that few people outside the direct investigation would see, but her official role prevented her from contributing to the assessment process. The knowledge she possessed from her previous career could be crucial for properly interpreting the intelligence being gathered, but revealing that knowledge would expose her carefully maintained cover identity. The technical specifications she had glimpsed suggested that the nuclear materials involved were not crude devices assembled by amateurs, but sophisticated weapons requiring extensive technical knowledge to construct and deploy. This level of capability indicated either state-sponsored terrorism or involvement by individuals with access to advanced nuclear technology. The implications for potential casualty levels made her hands shake as she continued her cleaning routine. Dr. Peterson received another phone call that lasted nearly 10 minutes, during which he took extensive notes and repeatedly consulted the intelligence reports on his computer. When the call ended, he immediately began composing what appeared to be a comprehensive threat assessment document. The urgency of his work suggested that decision-makers at the highest levels of government were waiting for his analysis. The secure communications terminal activated again, this time receiving rather than transmitting information. Peterson printed several documents that he immediately secured in a classified materials folder, following protocols that indicated the information was classified at the highest levels. Sarah's position allowed her to see that the documents contained detailed technical diagrams and operational timelines, but she couldn't examine them closely without compromising her cover. Additional security personnel arrived at the facility, including individuals who clearly weren't part of the regular staff. Their professional bearing and the deference shown to them by facility personnel suggested federal agents or military intelligence officers. The expansion of the investigation team indicated that the threat assessment was being taken seriously. At multiple levels of government. As dawn approached, Sarah realized that her shift was ending just as the crisis was intensifying. The intelligence gathering and threat assessment would continue throughout the day, but her janitorial schedule meant she would be excluded from further developments unless she found a way to remain at the facility. The knowledge she possessed could be crucial for preventing whatever attack was being planned, but using that knowledge would require revealing her true identity and background. The final piece of intelligence that changed everything arrived just as Sarah was preparing to complete her shift. A transmission came through the secure communications terminal that made Peterson immediately reach for his classified phone line. The conversation that followed was brief but intense, and when it ended, Peterson began implementing emergency protocols that Sarah recognized as preparations for imminent threat response. The intelligence had apparently provided specific details about timing and targets, transforming the investigation from threat assessment to active prevention. Sarah could see Peterson coordinating with multiple agencies, establishing communication protocols for real-time information sharing and requesting additional resources for what was clearly becoming an operational response rather than an analytical exercise. As Sarah prepared to leave the facility, she carried with her the knowledge that a nuclear attack was being planned against an American target, that the perpetrators possessed sophisticated weapons and technical capabilities, and that the window for prevention was rapidly closing. The decision she faced was whether to maintain her carefully constructed anonymity or risk everything to provide the intelligence agencies with information that could save countless lives. The quiet janitor, who had spent 6 years perfecting invisibility, was about to discover that some responsibilities were too important to hide from, no matter what the personal cost might be. Sarah made it exactly 3 blocks from the Brookfield facility before turning around. The weight of what she had witnessed pressed against her conscience like a physical force, making it impossible to drive home and pretend she was just a janitor who cleaned floors and emptied trash bins. At 6:23 a.m., she parked her aging Honda Civic in the employee lot and walked back through the main entrance, knowing that this decision would irrevocably change everything she had built over the past 6 years. Frank Morrison looked surprised to see her returning so soon after her shift had ended. "Sarah, did you forget something?" "I couldn't sleep," she replied, which was entirely true. "Thought I'd catch up on some deep cleaning in the archives while it's quiet during the day shift transition." The archives were located in the facility's basement level, a sprawling complex of climate-controlled storage rooms, where classified documents were maintained according to federal retention requirements. More importantly for Sarah's purposes, the archives contained historical intelligence files that weren't actively monitored by the communication wing's real-time security systems. As she made her way through the familiar corridors, Sarah's mind was racing through possibilities and implications. The intelligence fragments she had observed painted a picture of coordinated nuclear terrorism, but several elements didn't fit standard threat profiles. The technical sophistication suggested state-level resources, but the targeting patterns indicated domestic rather than international objectives. Someone with significant knowledge of American nuclear infrastructure was planning an attack from within. The archives required her maintenance badge for access, but Sarah had long ago discovered that her cleaning privileges extended to areas most staff never saw. Decades of accumulated intelligence files were stored here, including background investigations, threat assessments, and operational reports that provided context for current security concerns. If she was going to act on what she had witnessed, she needed to understand the full scope of what the facility's analysts were dealing with. The first file she accessed contained background information on domestic nuclear terrorism threats dating back 15 years. As she read through the carefully documented reports, Sarah began to recognize patterns that the current investigators might not have identified. Several previous threats had involved similar technical specifications and organizational structures, suggesting a long-term operation that was finally moving toward execution. Her photographic memory, a skill that had made her invaluable during her previous career, allowed her to correlate details across multiple reports with startling efficiency. Personnel names that appeared in different contexts, financial transactions that connected seemingly unrelated organizations, and technical specifications that indicated access to classified information. The picture that emerged was far more complex and dangerous than the current crisis response suggested. Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared in the archive's doorway just as Sarah was photographing a particularly significant document with a camera concealed in her cleaning supplies. The physicist's expression showed exhaustion and stress, but also curiosity about finding the night janitor working during day shift hours. "Sarah, I didn't expect to see you here during the day." Sarah looked up from her work, her mind calculating risks and possibilities in the fraction of a second before responding. "Dr. Vasquez, I heard there was some kind of emergency last night. I thought I should make sure all the sensitive areas were properly maintained." Elena studied her carefully, and Sarah could see the physicist's analytical mind processing inconsistencies in her explanation. "The emergency is significant. We're dealing with intelligence that suggests a credible nuclear threat against American targets." The admission hung between them like a bridge Sarah could either cross or ignore. Everything in her training told her to maintain her cover, express appropriate concern, and continue with her janitorial duties. But the files she had been reading contained information that could be crucial for preventing mass casualties. "Nuclear threats are always serious," Sarah replied carefully. "I imagine the facility's technical experts are working around the clock to assess the situation." "They are, but—" Elena hesitated, then seemed to make a decision of her own. "Sarah, I've worked with you for years, and you've always seemed to understand our work at a level that goes beyond typical maintenance training. The intelligence we're processing involves nuclear materials that could level a major city. If you know anything at all, that might help." Sarah felt the walls of her carefully constructed identity beginning to crumble. The moment she had dreaded for 6 years was arriving, and the decision she made in the next few seconds would determine whether she remained invisible or stepped back into a world she had tried desperately to leave behind. "Dr. Vasquez," she said quietly, "the nuclear materials described in the intelligence reports, what specific isotopic signatures were identified?" Elena's expression changed immediately. The question demonstrated technical knowledge that no janitor should possess, phrased in language that indicated formal training in nuclear physics or intelligence analysis. "How do you know about isotopic signatures?" Sarah set down her cleaning supplies and removed her wire-rimmed glasses, a small gesture that somehow transformed her entire appearance. Without the defensive posture of a maintenance worker, she looked like someone entirely different. "Because 8 years ago, I was Senior Intelligence Analyst Sarah Chun with the Defense Intelligence Agency's Counterproliferation Division. I specialized in tracking nuclear materials and preventing them from reaching terrorist organizations." The revelation hit Elena like a physical blow. You've been working here as a janitor for 6 years, but you're actually ... I was burned during operation that went wrong. My identity was compromised, my handler was killed, and I was marked for elimination by the same people I was investigating. The Defense Intelligence Agency gave me a new identity and this position as protective cover while they tried to roll up the network that wanted me dead. Elena stared at her, processing the implications. The network. Was it related to nuclear terrorism? It was a consortium of arms dealers, corrupt military contractors, and foreign intelligence services working together to acquire and distribute nuclear materials. I had identified key players and was preparing to testify before a classified congressional committee when everything went sideways. The people I was investigating had sources inside the intelligence community. "And you think this current threat is connected to the same network?" Sarah nodded grimly. "The technical specifications I observed last night match materials I was tracking 8 years ago. Highly enriched uranium with specific isotopic signatures that could only come from particular sources. If the same people are involved, then the current investigation is walking into a trap." Elena's training as a scientist helped her process this information analytically rather than emotionally. What kind of trap? The intelligence being received is probably genuine, but incomplete. The people behind this operation specialize in compartmentalized planning. What your analysts are seeing is likely one component of a larger operation designed to draw attention and resources away from the primary target. You're saying there are multiple nuclear devices? I'm saying there's a primary target that's being protected by creating a secondary threat that will absorb all available response resources. It's a classic misdirection strategy that this network has used before in smaller operations. Elena pulled out her phone, then hesitated. "If I report this conversation, you'll be exposed. Your cover will be blown, and if these people are still looking for you, they'll find me," Sarah finished. "But if I don't share what I know, thousands of people might die. The choice isn't really complicated. What do you need?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, studying Elena's face and seeing the same dedication to protecting innocent lives that had driven her own career decisions. I need access to the intelligence files from the communications wing. Real access, not what I can observe while cleaning around computer terminals. And I need you to trust me when I tell you that the people investigating this threat are about to make mistakes that will get a lot of people killed. Alina made her decision with the same analytical precision she brought to nuclear physics problems. The facility director is Dr. Amanda Foster. She has the authority to grant temporary security clearances in emergency situations. If I explain the situation, Dr. Foster will want verification of my identity and background. That verification process will take hours we don't have, and it will send signals through intelligence channels that will alert the same people who tried to kill me 8 years ago. Then what do you suggest? Sarah gathered the documents she had been reviewing, organizing them with the efficiency of someone accustomed to processing large amounts of classified information under time pressure. I suggest we examine the intelligence your people have gathered, identify the misdirection components, and figure out where the real attack is being planned. Then we can worry about proper authorization and security protocols. You're asking me to commit multiple federal crimes. I'm asking you to help prevent a nuclear attack on American soil. The legal ramifications are secondary to the potential casualties. Elena weighed the decision for nearly 30 seconds, her scientific training warring with her moral obligations. Finally, she nodded. What do you need to see first? Everything. The intercepted communications, the technical specifications, the target analysis, and most importantly, the timeline assessments. If this network is operating the way they did 8 years ago, they're planning something that will happen much sooner than your analysts expect. As they prepared to leave the archives, Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling over her shoulders. For 6 years, she had successfully hidden from a past that had nearly killed her. Now she was voluntarily stepping back into that world, knowing that the people who wanted her dead were probably still looking for her, but the alternative was allowing a nuclear attack to succeed when she possessed knowledge that could prevent it. The quiet janitor who had spent years perfecting invisibility was about to become visible again, and this time the stakes were higher than her own survival. Elena led her toward the communications wing, where the crisis response was intensifying. As more intelligence arrived, Sarah followed, knowing that each step was taking her further from the safety of anonymity and closer to a confrontation with enemies who had already proven they were willing to kill to protect their operations. The transformation was beginning, and there would be no going back to the simple life of cleaning floors and emptying trash bins. Sarah Chun, Defense Intelligence Agency analyst, was about to resume a career that had been interrupted by betrayal and attempted murder. This time, she was determined to finish what she had started, regardless of what it cost her personally. Nuclear threat was real, imminent, and far more complex than the current investigators understood. Sarah's knowledge could make the difference between successful prevention and catastrophic failure. But using that knowledge would expose her to the same people who had tried to eliminate her 8 years ago, turning her return to intelligence work into a race between stopping the attack and staying alive long enough to complete the mission. As they approached the communications wing, Sarah could hear the intensified activity of a crisis response in full operation. Multiple agencies were coordinating through the facility's communication systems. Intelligence was flowing in from sources around the world, and senior officials were making decisions based on incomplete information that she was about to step into. The center of that operation, bringing knowledge and expertise that could save lives or get her killed. The invisible janitor was becoming visible again, and the world was about to discover that some secrets were too dangerous to stay hidden. The communications wing had transformed into a war room. Large displays showed real-time intelligence feeds from multiple agencies, and workstations buzzed with analysts coordinating responses across different time zones. Sarah followed Alina through security checkpoints that her red maintenance badge had never allowed her to pass. feeling exposed and vulnerable as she stepped into an environment where her face would be recorded by multiple surveillance systems. Dr. James Peterson looked up from his workstation as they approached, his exhausted expression shifting to confusion when he recognized the night janitor accompanying Dr. Vasquez. "Elena, we're dealing with classified intelligence here." "I don't think... double quotes, Jim, meet Sarah Chun," Elena interrupted. "Former senior intelligence analyst, Defense Intelligence Agency, Counter-Proliferation Division. She has knowledge that could be crucial for understanding what we're dealing with." Peterson's expression cycled through disbelief, suspicion, and cautious hope in rapid succession. "The janitor is... You're claiming she's a former DIA?" Sarah stepped forward, her posture and bearing subtly shifting as she allowed her professional persona to emerge fully. "Dr. Peterson, the intelligence you've been processing indicates weapons-grade uranium with isotopic signatures consistent with material that went missing from Soviet stockpiles in the 1990s. The transportation schedules suggest coordination through Eastern European networks, and the target analysis shows knowledge of American nuclear facility security protocols." Peterson stared at her, recognizing technical language, analytical frameworks that weren't commonly known outside the intelligence community. "How do you know the specific details of classified intelligence reports?" "Because I spent 3 years tracking the same network that's behind this operation. They specialize in acquiring nuclear materials from former Soviet sources and distributing them to the highest bidders. What you're seeing now is the culmination of a plan that's been in development for nearly a decade. If that's true, then why are you working as a janitor instead of briefing intelligence committees?" Sarah's expression darkened. "Because when I got close to identifying the key players in this network, they tried to kill me. My handler was murdered, my identity was compromised, and I was forced into witness protection. The people behind this operation have sources inside our own intelligence agencies." Peterson absorbed this information while studying the intelligence displays around them. "You're suggesting that our current investigation has been compromised?" "I'm suggesting that the intelligence you're receiving is genuine but incomplete. This network uses compartmentalized operations to create multiple layers of misdirection. What you're tracking is probably a secondary operation designed to draw attention and resources away from their primary target." Dr. Vasquez moved to one of the workstations and began accessing the technical specifications that had arrived overnight. "Sarah, if you're right about misdirection, how do we identify what they're hiding?" Sarah studied the data displays, her trained eye immediately recognizing patterns that the current analysts might not have connected. "The uranium signatures you've detected... they're too clean. Weapons-grade material from Soviet sources should show specific contamination patterns from the enrichment processes used in that era. What you're seeing has been processed through modern facilities." "Meaning what?" Peterson asked. "Meaning someone with access to current nuclear technology has been upgrading stolen Soviet materials. That level of capability requires either state sponsorship or access to advanced research facilities." Peterson's phone rang, and he answered with increasing agitation as the caller briefed him on developing intelligence. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "FBI reports indicate that nuclear materials matching our intelligence have been detected moving through the port of Baltimore. Multiple agencies are coordinating response teams." Sarah felt ice forming in her stomach. "How many response teams?" "Everything available. FBI, ATF, Nuclear Emergency Support Team, military specialists. They're treating this as the primary threat." "It's not," Sarah said with absolute certainty. "It's a diversion. While every available resource is focused on Baltimore, the real attack is being prepared somewhere else." "How can you be so certain?" Sarah moved to the workstation and began analyzing the intelligence reports with practiced efficiency. "Because this is exactly what they did in kill you in 2018. created a massive response to a secondary threat, while the primary operation proceeded undetected. By the time we realized what was happening, they had already extracted enough enriched material to fuel multiple devices. Elena joined her at the workstation, her nuclear physics background allowing her to understand the technical implications. If they're using Baltimore as a misdirection, what would be the primary target? Something that would create maximum psychological impact while demonstrating their capability to strike at the heart of American nuclear infrastructure. Sarah paused, connections forming in her mind as she analyzed the intelligence patterns. What major nuclear facilities are within a day's drive of the port cities? Peterson consulted his database. 3 Mile Island, Calvert Cliffs, North Anna, and ... He stopped, realization dawning. The Brookfield facility. We're not just analyzing the threat, Sarah said quietly. We're sitting in the middle of it. The implications hit all three of them simultaneously. The Brookfield facility housed some of the nation's most sensitive nuclear research, including weapons design programs and advanced reactor technologies. An attack here would cripple American nuclear capabilities while providing the terrorists with access to classified information and additional nuclear materials. Peterson immediately began coordinating with facility security, but Sarah knew that standard protocols wouldn't be sufficient against the level of sophistication they were facing. Dr. Peterson, you need to understand that this network has been planning this operation for years. They know our security procedures, our response protocols, and our weaknesses. What are you recommending? Before Sarah could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Emergency lighting activated and automated announcements instructed all personnel to report to designated secure areas. Through the windows, they could see security vehicles surrounding the building perimeter. Too late, Sarah said grimly. They're already here. Elena moved to the communications console and attempted to contact outside agencies, but the lines were dead. All external communications have been severed. Peterson tried his encrypted satellite phone with similar results. We're completely isolated. Sarah felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that accompanied combat situations, her training automatically shifting her into tactical assessment mode. The communication blackout means they have electronic warfare capabilities. The timing suggests they've been monitoring our investigation and moved to action when they realized we were getting close to identifying their real plan. What do? We assumed that everyone involved in the Baltimore operation was intended to be eliminated along with the nuclear material, creating martyrs and destroying evidence. We assume that the Brookfield facility is the primary target, and we assume that we have very little time before they achieve their objectives. Security Captain Marcus Webb's voice crackled through the facility's internal communication system. All personnel remain in secure positions. We have unidentified vehicles approaching the facility perimeter. This is not a drill. Sarah moved to the intelligence workstation and began accessing files with clearance levels that her maintenance badge definitely didn't authorize. Dr. Peterson, I need you to understand that my presence here has probably accelerated their timeline. If they know I'm alive and active, they'll want to eliminate me before I can expose their operation. How would they know you're here? Because intelligence systems have monitoring protocols that flag certain activities. When I accessed classified files in the archives this morning, and when I entered this wing without proper clearance, those actions created records that could be detected by anyone with sources inside the system. Elena realized the implications. You're saying that by trying to help us, you've made yourself a target and potentially put the entire facility at risk. I'm saying that the people behind this operation are the same ones who tried to kill me 8 years ago. They have resources, connections, and most importantly, they have patience. This attack isn't just about nuclear terrorism. It's about eliminating the one person who can identify their leadership structure. Peterson's workstation received an incoming message that made his expression change from concern to alarm. Sarah, we're receiving intelligence that the individual responsible for coordinating the nuclear materials acquisition is someone code-named Architect. Does that designation mean anything to you? Sarah's blood went cold. Viktor Kozlov, former GRU colonel who went freelance after the Soviet collapse. He was the primary target of my investigation 8 years ago. If he's involved, then this operation is far more sophisticated and dangerous than anything we've discussed. Who is he? Someone who has been building this network for over a decade, acquiring nuclear materials, recruiting specialists, and developing the infrastructure necessary for large-scale operations. More importantly, he's someone who has been hunting me for 8 years because I'm the only person who can connect him to previous operations. The facility's lights flickered and went out, replaced by emergency power systems that cast everything in an ominous red glow. Through the windows, they could see armed figures moving toward the building with professional coordination that suggested military training. Elena, how long would it take to download all the critical research data from the facility's servers? Sarah asked, with proper authorization and full system access? Maybe 20 minutes. Without authorization? Longer, and it would trigger every security protocol in the system. Sarah was already moving toward the workstation terminals, her fingers flying across keyboards as she accessed systems with techniques that went far beyond standard user protocols. Dr. Peterson, I need you to coordinate with facility security. Tell them we're dealing with a coordinated assault by professionally trained operatives with specific intelligence about our capabilities and procedures. What are you doing? I'm downloading everything. Research data, personnel files, security, protocols, intelligence reports, and most importantly, communication logs that might reveal how they've been monitoring our activities. Elena watched Sarah work with growing amazement as classified systems opened under her access attempts. How are you bypassing security protocols this quickly? Because I helped design some of these systems during my previous career. The Defense Intelligence Agency required its analysts to understand both offensive and defensive cyber capabilities. Peterson coordinated with security forces while monitoring Sarah's data extraction. Captain Webb reports that the perimeter has been breached in 3 locations. Armed personnel are entering the building using access routes that suggest detailed knowledge of facility layout. They've been planning this for months, Sarah said without looking up from her work. Surveillance, reconnaissance, probably infiltration of support staff to map internal security systems. The sound of gunfire echoed through the building, confirming that the facility's security forces were engaged in active combat. Sarah's data download was proceeding, but slowly, each file requiring individual decryption and transfer protocols. Sarah, Elena said urgently, if they capture this facility and its research data, what are the implications? Advanced nuclear, weapons design information, classified reactor technologies, intelligence on foreign nuclear programs, and access to communication systems that could compromise operations worldwide. Sarah paused in her work. This isn't just terrorism. It's espionage on a scale that could shift global power balances. Peterson received another communication from security that made his expression grave. They're moving through the building, systematically securing areas rather than just destroying them. This is definitely about intelligence gathering rather than simple destruction. Which means they need time to extract data and materials, Sarah said. Time we can deny them if we can coordinate an effective defense. Elena moved to the window and observed the tactical situation developing outside. There are more vehicles arriving. This is a much larger operation than we initially understood. Sarah completed her data extraction and immediately began implementing electronic countermeasures designed to prevent the attackers from accessing the facility's most sensitive systems. Dr. Peterson, we need to assume that Viktor Kozlov is personally involved in this operation. That means we're dealing with someone who has planned specifically for my presence here. What does that mean for our situation? It means that everything we do from this point forward will be anticipated and countered, unless we can do something completely unexpected. The lights went out completely, and emergency communications systems began broadcasting evacuation instructions. But Sarah knew that evacuation was exactly what their attackers wanted, creating chaos and confusion that would allow them to achieve their objectives while the facility's personnel were focused on escape. "We're not evacuating," she announced with quiet authority. "We're going to stop them." Sarah's transformation from janitor to operative was complete as she moved through the darkened facility with predatory grace. 6 years of cleaning these corridors had given her an intimate knowledge of every service tunnel, maintenance shaft, and emergency exit that the attacking force couldn't possibly possess. While they followed building schematics and security layouts, she navigated by instinct through spaces that didn't appear on any official blueprints. The facility's ventilation system became her highway. Sarah led Elena and Peterson through access routes that bypassed the main corridors where armed teams were systematically clearing rooms. Her maintenance experience had shown her that the building's infrastructure contained hidden pathways originally designed for emergency situations that had never been properly documented in security protocols. "Where are we going?" Elena whispered, as they crawled through a service tunnel that connected the communications wing to the facility's central server room. "To turn their advantages against them," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had operated in hostile territory before. "They've cut external communications, but they're using electronic warfare equipment that requires significant power consumption. If we can access the facility's electrical systems, we can create selective outages that will disrupt their coordination." Peterson struggled to keep pace as they navigated the narrow passages. "Won't cutting power affect our own systems?" "The critical systems run on isolated backup power that I can control independently. But their portable electronic warfare equipment will be operating on battery power that can't sustain extended operations." They emerged in the server room, a climate-controlled environment filled with the computing equipment that managed the facility's most sensitive operations. Sarah immediately moved to a terminal that provided access to building management systems, her fingers flying across controls with expertise that amazed her companions. "During my maintenance work, I learned that this facility has experimental power grid technology that allows for extremely precise electrical control," she explained while working. "Each section of the building can be independently managed, including individual rooms and even specific electrical outlets." Elena watched the building schematics appear on Sarah's screen, showing power distribution throughout the complex. "You're going to selectively disable power to areas where the attackers are operating. Better than that, I'm going to create power fluctuations that will disrupt their electronic equipment while maintaining our own capabilities. Their electronic warfare systems are designed to operate in stable power environments. Introduce electrical irregularities, and their equipment becomes unreliable." Sarah implemented a complex pattern of power cycling that would create electromagnetic interference throughout specific areas of the facility. The attacking force would find their communications degraded, their electronic surveillance compromised, and their coordination severely hampered. Peterson monitored the facility's internal communication system while Sarah worked. "Security forces report that the attackers are moving with detailed knowledge of our layout and procedures. They've neutralized our primary security stations and are proceeding toward the classified research areas." "How many security personnel do we have?" 12 on duty, but they're trained for facility protection, not military combat. The attacking force appears to have superior training and equipment." Sarah completed her electrical countermeasures and turned to face her companions. "Dr. Peterson, I need you to understand that Viktor Kozlov doesn't just want the nuclear research. Data, he wants me. Everything that's happening here is designed to force me into a position where I have to reveal myself and my capabilities. You're saying this entire operation is a trap? I'm saying that Kozlov has been hunting me for 8 years, and he's patient enough to construct an elaborate operation that serves multiple purposes. Acquiring nuclear research, eliminating security threats, and settling personal scores. Elena studied the building schematics on Sarah's screen. If he knows the facility layout this well, then he's been planning this assault for months. How do we counter someone who's had that much preparation time? By doing things that can't be planned for, Sarah replied, accessing additional building systems. Kozlov's operation depends on predictable responses from security forces and facility personnel. Standard evacuation procedures, conventional defense tactics, and typical crisis management protocols. Sarah activated the facility's experimental emergency systems, protocols that had been installed during construction but never fully implemented. Blast barriers began sealing critical areas. Emergency lockdown procedures activated in sections containing the most sensitive research, and automated systems began relocating classified materials to secure storage areas. These emergency protocols were designed for scenarios involving nuclear accidents or terrorist attacks, she explained. But they were never integrated into normal security procedures because the facility was considered too well protected to require them. Peterson watched in amazement as the building essentially reconfigured itself around them. How do you have access to experimental systems that most facility personnel don't even know exist? Because my maintenance work required me to understand every system in the building. Over 6 years, I've learned not just how these systems operate, but how they can be modified and enhanced. Elena monitored the effects of Sarah's actions through the facility's sensor network. The attackers have stopped advancing. Their communication pattern suggests they're dealing with unexpected complications. Good. Now we move to phase 2. Sarah led them through another series of service passages toward the facility's central research laboratory, where the most valuable nuclear technology data was stored. Her plan required her to reach the laboratory before Kozlov's forces could secure it. But more importantly, it required her to make contact with the man who had been hunting her. For 8 years, the laboratory occupied the facility's most secure section, protected by multiple layers of physical and electronic security systems. During normal operations, access required biometric authentication, security clearances, and escort procedures that could take hours to complete. But Sarah's modifications to the building's systems had created opportunities that didn't exist under normal circumstances. The laboratory contains experimental reactor designs, weapons-grade material analysis, and classified intelligence on foreign nuclear programs, she explained as they approached the secure section. If Kozlov acquires that information, he could sell it to hostile governments or use it to enhance his own nuclear terrorism capabilities. Peterson checked his communication device, finding that Sarah's electrical countermeasures had restored some internal connectivity. I'm receiving reports that the attackers have regrouped and are focusing their efforts on the central laboratory section. They seem to know exactly where the most valuable materials are located. Because Kozlov has inside information, Sarah said grimly. Someone with access to facility operations has been providing him with detailed intelligence about our capabilities and vulnerabilities. Elena absorbed this implication. You're saying we have a traitor inside the facility. I'm saying that Kozlov's network specializes in recruiting assets within target organizations. It's how they've been successful for so many years. They reached the laboratory section just as Sarah's communication device activated with an incoming message. The voice that emerged was cultured, speaking English with a slight Russian accent that Sarah recognized with cold certainty. Sarah Chun, or should I say Anna Volkov? Did you really think you could hide from me forever by pretending to be a janitor? Sarah's blood went ice cold. Anna Volkov had been her deep cover identity during the operation that had nearly gotten her killed 8 years ago. Only 3 people had known that name, and 2 of them were dead. Viktor Kozlov, she replied, activating the communication system. Still compensating for your failures by attacking civilians? Hardly civilians, my dear Anna. The Brookfield facility houses some of America's most sensitive nuclear research. Acquiring that information will be quite profitable, though not as satisfying as finally eliminating the analyst who cost me several very lucrative contracts. Elena and Peterson listened to the exchange with growing understanding of the personal dimension underlying the broader crisis. This wasn't just international espionage or nuclear terrorism. It was a confrontation between 2 intelligence professionals whose conflict had been developing for nearly a decade. The contracts you lost were for selling nuclear materials to terrorist organizations, Sarah said. Forgive me if I don't feel guilty about preventing mass casualties. Your moral righteousness was always your weakness. Anna, you see the world in terms of right and wrong, while I see it in terms of profit and loss. Tonight, you become a loss that I can finally write off. Sarah moved to the laboratory's main computer terminal and began accessing the nuclear research data that Kozlov was seeking. Dr. Vasquez, how quickly can you identify the most critical information in these systems? What are you planning? If Kozlov wants this data, then we're going to make sure he gets exactly what he deserves. Elena understood immediately. You're going to corrupt the files, plant false information? I'm going to give him data that looks authentic but contains enough errors to make any resulting weapons ineffective or dangerous to their operators. Nuclear physics is precise science. Small modifications to critical calculations can have catastrophic consequences. Peterson monitored their communications while Sarah and Elena worked to sabotage the research data. The attackers are breaching the laboratory section. We have maybe 10 minutes before they reach this room. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard as she implemented sophisticated modifications to the nuclear research files. Her intelligence training had included extensive study of disinformation techniques, but this application required Elena's scientific expertise to ensure the corrupted data would be convincing to experts while remaining fundamentally flawed. The reactor design files are the most dangerous, Elena explained as she identified critical information. If someone tries to build reactors based on corrupted specifications, the results could range from simple failure to massive radioactive contamination. Perfect. Kozlov's customers won't be able to test these designs without risking exposure, so they'll proceed based on faith in his reputation. Kozlov's voice returned through the communication system, closer now and carrying undertones of satisfaction. Anna, your electronic countermeasures were clever, but my team includes specialists who understand American infrastructure systems. We've restored our communications and identified your location. Then you know I'm in the central laboratory, with access to everything you came here to steal. Indeed, which presents us both with an interesting situation. You have something I want, and I have something you value. What's that? The lives of everyone in this facility. My team has placed charges throughout the building that will eliminate all evidence of our operation, including any personnel who might serve as witnesses. However, I'm prepared to be merciful if you cooperate. Sarah's expression hardened as she realized the full scope of Kozlov's planning. This had never been simply about stealing nuclear research. It was about eliminating everyone who could connect him to the operation, including Sarah herself. What kind of cooperation? You will transfer all research data to secure storage devices that my team will provide. You will then accompany me to verify the authenticity of the information. Once I'm satisfied that the data is complete and accurate, I'll allow the facility personnel to evacuate before the charges detonate. Elena and Peterson exchanged glances, recognizing that Kozlov's offer was essentially a death sentence for Sarah disguised as negotiation. And if I refuse, then everyone dies tonight, including you. At least my way, you have the satisfaction of knowing that your cooperation saved innocent lives. Sarah continued her data corruption while considering Kozlov's ultimatum. She needed more time to complete the sabotage, but she also needed to prevent him from simply destroying the facility and everyone in it. "I'll need guarantees," she said finally. "Proof that you'll honor your agreement." "You're hardly in a position to demand guarantees, Anna." "Actually, I am. Because while you've been talking, I've been implementing security protocols that will prevent you from accessing the nuclear research data without my personal authorization. Kill me, and the information you came for becomes permanently inaccessible." The silence that followed lasted nearly 30 seconds, during which Sarah could imagine Kozlov calculating the risks and benefits of various approaches to their standoff. "Clever." He finally admitted, "Very well. I'll provide proof of my good faith. My team will escort the facility personnel to safe areas before beginning the final phase of our operation." "How do I know you won't simply execute them once they're away from the laboratory?" "Because I need you to believe that cooperation is possible. If you think I'm lying about sparing lives, you'll fight rather than surrender. Fighting would be inconvenient." Sarah exchanged looks with Elena and Peterson, knowing that they were all thinking the same thing. Kozlov's logic was sound, but trusting him would be fatal. She needed to find a way to protect the facility's personnel while preventing him from acquiring the nuclear research data. "I'll need 1 hour to complete the data transfer," she said. "You have 30 minutes. 45 minutes, or I destroy the entire database. 40 minutes, and Anna? Don't try to be clever. My team includes technical specialists who will verify the authenticity of any data you provide." Sarah smiled grimly as she continued corrupting the nuclear research files. Kozlov's technical specialists were about to receive the most authentic-looking false information she had ever created. The final phase of their 8-year conflict was about to begin. The central laboratory's security doors opened with a soft hydraulic hiss, admitting 3 figures who moved with the disciplined precision of professional operatives. Viktor Kozlov entered first, his appearance exactly matching Sarah's 8-year-old memories. Tall, lean, with silver hair and pale blue eyes that missed nothing. Behind him came 2 specialists carrying equipment cases and weapons that suggested extensive preparation for this moment. Sarah stood at the laboratory's main computer terminal, her hands positioned over the keyboard in a gesture that could either complete data transfers or initiate destruction protocols. Elena and Peterson flanked her, their academic backgrounds providing no preparation for the deadly chess game now unfolding in the sterile environment of advanced nuclear research. "Anna Volkov," Kozlov said, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a hunter who had finally cornered elusive prey. "You look different without the blonde hair and colored contacts." "The janitor disguise was quite inspired, I must admit. It kept me alive for 6 years while you hunted shadows," Sarah replied, her tone matching his conversational madness despite the lethal tension filling the room. "Though I'm surprised you committed this many resources to settling a personal score." "Personal?" Kozlov smiled, an expression that held no warmth. "My dear Anna, you cost me over $50 million in canceled contracts and another $30 million in operational expenses. This has always been about business." Elena watched the exchange with fascination and terror, recognizing that she was witnessing a confrontation between 2 individuals whose conflict had implications far beyond personal vendetta. "Sarah, who is Anna Volkov?" "My deep cover identity. When I was investigating Kozlov's nuclear trafficking network," Sarah replied without taking her eyes off her adversary. "Anna Volkov is a Russian-American physicist with questionable loyalties and flexible ethics. Exactly the kind of person Kozlov's organization might try to recruit." Kozlov moved closer to the computer terminal, studying the progress of Sarah's data transfers with professional interest. The operation was quite elegant. You spent 18 months building Anna's reputation, establishing connections with individuals who might provide access to nuclear materials, and gradually working your way into my organization's periphery, until you discovered that Anna was feeding information to American intelligence agencies, Sarah continued. The ambush in Prague was supposed to eliminate the security threat while protecting your network's operational security. It would have succeeded if you hadn't been quite so paranoid about exit strategies, Kozlov admitted. Most intelligence analysts trust their handlers and backup teams. You always assumed that someone might betray you. Peterson listened to their conversation with a growing understanding of the operation's complexity. The betrayal 8 years ago. It wasn't just about nuclear trafficking, was it? Victor's network was developing capabilities that went far beyond simple arms dealing, Sarah explained. They were building infrastructure for coordinated nuclear terrorism, acquiring materials and expertise that could threaten multiple targets simultaneously. Kozlov gestured for his specialists to begin examining the laboratory equipment while maintaining his focus on Sarah. Anna always understood the broader implications of our work. Most intelligence analysts see individual operations in isolation. But she recognized the strategic framework we were constructing. A framework designed to destabilize global nuclear security while generating massive profits from chaos, Sarah said. Your customers weren't just terrorist organizations. They were governments that wanted plausible deniability for nuclear attacks. Supply and demand, my dear. We simply provided services that certain parties required. Elena found her voice despite the surreal nature of the conversation. You're talking about enabling nuclear warfare as if it were a business transaction. All warfare is business, Dr. Vasquez, Kozlov replied smoothly. The only question is whether one approaches it with honesty about motivations or hides behind pretenses of ideology and patriotism. Sarah's data corruption was nearly complete, but she needed additional time to ensure the sabotage would be undetectable during initial examination. Victor, your philosophical justifications were always more sophisticated than your actual capabilities. 8 years ago, your network was impressive, but limited. Tonight's operation suggests significant expansion. Indeed, the setback you caused in Prague required us to rebuild more carefully, with better security protocols and more reliable personnel. We've also diversified our operations to include cyber warfare, biological weapons, and information warfare. Which explains how you identified my location and planned this assault with such precision. Kozlov smiled again, this expression carrying genuine amusement. Your presence at the Brookfield facility was never really hidden, Anna. We've been monitoring your activities for over 2 years, waiting for the right opportunity to resolve our unfinished business. The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. If Kozlov had known her location for 2 years, then her entire carefully constructed life had been an illusion of safety while he planned this operation around her presence. You're lying, she said, but her voice carried uncertainty. Am I? Dr. Vasquez, when did you first notice that your janitor seemed unusually knowledgeable about nuclear physics and laboratory procedures? Elena's expression changed as she processed the implication. You've been watching the facility long enough to observe our interactions and behavioral patterns. Surveillance technology has advanced considerably since Anna's active duty period, Kozlov confirmed. We've been able to monitor conversations, document relationships, and analyze operational patterns without requiring physical presence inside your facility. Peterson realized the broader implications. If you've been monitoring us for 2 years, then you know about ongoing research projects, security procedures, and personnel capabilities far beyond what any assault team could gather through conventional reconnaissance. Precisely. Tonight's operation benefits from extensive preparation that would have been impossible without Anna's presence to provide motivation for thorough planning. Sarah continued her data manipulation while processing this information. Kozlov's Revelation meant that the attack wasn't simply about settling scores or acquiring nuclear research. It was about demonstrating capabilities that could threaten any facility, anywhere, with precision that made conventional security measures irrelevant. "The Baltimore diversion," she said suddenly. "It wasn't just misdirection to draw resources away from this facility. It was proof of concept for coordinated operations that could target multiple locations simultaneously." "Very good, Anna. You always were exceptional at tactical analysis." Elena watched Sarah's expression change as she grasped the full scope of what they were facing. "You're saying this is a demonstration? That tonight's attack is designed to prove capabilities rather than just acquire materials?" "Dr. Vasquez, the nuclear research data in this facility is valuable, but not irreplaceable. Similar information exists in other locations that could be targeted with equivalent success. The true value of tonight's operation is demonstrating that no facility, regardless of security measures, is beyond our reach." Sarah realized that her data corruption might not be sufficient to prevent Kozlov from achieving his broader objectives. Even if the nuclear research proved useless, the intelligence gathered during the assault would provide his network with insights into American security capabilities that could enable future operations. "Victor, if this is about demonstrating capabilities, then why the personal focus on eliminating me? You could achieve your strategic objectives without settling old scores." "Because, my dear Anna, you represent something my clients find very concerning. Proof that American intelligence agencies can successfully penetrate our operations. Your survival for 8 years, despite our extensive efforts to locate and eliminate you, suggests that your methods might be replicated by others. So killing me becomes a marketing demonstration for your clients?" "Exactly. Proof that we can eliminate even the most skilled and well-protected intelligence assets, regardless of how long they remain hidden." The conversation was interrupted by one of Kozlov's specialists who had completed his examination of the laboratory equipment and data systems. "Sir, the transfer appears to be proceeding normally, but I'm detecting anomalies in some of the research files." Sarah tensed, knowing that her sabotage might have been discovered, but Kozlov simply nodded. "Expected, given Anna's reputation for thoroughness. What kind of anomalies?" "Subtle modifications to calculation parameters, altered material specifications, and embedded verification codes that could indicate authenticity or tampering." "Can you determine which?" "Not without extensive analysis that would require hours or days." Kozlov studied Sarah's face, searching for clues that might indicate whether the anomalies represented sabotage or security measures. "Anna, you've had 40 minutes to prepare data transfers that should have required 4 hours. Either you're remarkably efficient, or you're attempting to provide us with corrupted information. Maybe I'm just motivated to complete this transaction and get you out of my life permanently. Or maybe you're gambling that I won't risk accepting potentially false data, and will instead simply destroy the facility and eliminate all witnesses." Elena realized that Sarah's sabotage strategy might have backfired by creating suspicion that could result in everyone's death. "Victor, if you destroy the facility, you lose the intelligence value that seems to be your primary objective." "True, Dr. Vasquez, but I also eliminate the risk of accepting corrupted data that could compromise future operations or endanger my clients." Peterson watched the psychological chess match unfolding between Sarah and Kozlov, recognizing that both were calculating odds and outcomes with the cold precision of professional intelligence operatives. "What would convince you that the data is authentic?" "Verification from someone whose expertise I trust and whose cooperation I can ensure. Through appropriate leverage." Kozlov gestured toward Elena. "Dr. Vasquez, your reputation in nuclear physics is well established, and your presence here suggests familiarity with the facility's research projects. You're going to examine the data Anna has prepared and confirm its authenticity. And if I refuse? Then I'll assume the data has been corrupted and proceed with facility destruction. Everyone dies, including Anna, and I accept the loss of intelligence value in exchange for eliminating security threats. Elena looked at Sarah, recognizing that she was being forced to choose between potentially enabling nuclear terrorism and ensuring the immediate death of everyone in the facility. How do I know you'll honor your agreement if I cooperate? You don't, but you know with certainty what happens if you refuse. Sarah realized that Kozlov had successfully maneuvered them into an impossible position. Elena's cooperation would validate the corrupted data, but her refusal would result in everyone's immediate execution. The psychological pressure was designed to force compliance through fear rather than rational calculation. There's a third option, Sarah said quietly, which is, I'll verify the data myself. Anna Volkov was trained in nuclear physics before. She became an intelligence analyst. My evaluation would be more credible than Dr. Vasquez's forced cooperation. Kozlov considered this proposal, weighing the advantages of having Sarah validate her own work against the risks of giving her additional opportunities for sabotage or escape. Interesting proposition, Anna, but it assumes I trust you to provide an honest evaluation of your own work. It assumes you're intelligent enough to recognize that my evaluation will be honest, because my life depends on convincing you that the data is authentic. And Dr. Vasquez? What happens to her during your evaluation? Sarah looked at Elena, knowing that her next words would determine whether her sabotage strategy succeeded or resulted in catastrophic failure for everyone involved. She comes with me. Her expertise ensures that my evaluation is accurate, and her presence ensures that I don't attempt any additional sabotage. Kozlov smiled, recognizing the elegance of Sarah's proposal. Very well, Anna. You have 30 minutes to convince me that the nuclear research data you've prepared is worth the considerable expense of tonight's operation. If you succeed, Dr. Vasquez and the other facility personnel survive. If you fail, I understand the stakes. As Sarah and Elena moved toward the computer terminals containing the corrupted nuclear research data, both knew they were entering the final phase of a confrontation that would determine not just their own survival, but the future capabilities of one of the world's most dangerous criminal networks. The verification process was about to begin, and Sarah's 8 years of hiding were about to end in either vindication or death. Sarah approached the computer terminal, with Elena beside her, knowing that the next 30 minutes would determine whether 8 years of careful planning would culminate in success or catastrophic failure. The corrupted nuclear research data displayed on the screens looked authentic to casual observation, but would it pass scrutiny from Kozlov's technical specialists and her own forced verification? Begin with the reactor design specifications, Kozlov instructed, positioning himself where he could observe both the computer displays and Sarah's facial expressions. My clients are particularly interested in advanced containment technologies and fuel enrichment processes. Sarah accessed the reactor files, her mind racing through the subtle modifications she and Elena had implemented. The mathematical foundations appeared sound, but critical safety parameters had been altered in ways that would cause catastrophic failures if anyone attempted to build reactors based on these specifications. The primary reactor design utilizes a molten salt configuration with thorium fuel cycles, Sarah explained, her voice carrying the confident authority of someone discussing familiar technology. The containment system incorporates experimental materials that provide superior radiation shielding while reducing construction costs. Elena watched nervously as Sarah highlighted technical specifications that looked convincing but contained fundamental flaws. The experimental materials Sarah described existed in laboratory quantities, but couldn't be manufactured at the scale required for actual reactor construction. Kozlov's technical specialist, Dr. Marcus Weber, studied the displays with professional interest. Weber was a former German nuclear engineer who had been recruited by Kozlov's network after his security clearance was revoked for financial irregularities. His expertise was legitimate, making him potentially capable of detecting the sabotage. The neutron flux calculations appear consistent with established physics, Weber observed, examining the mathematical models underlying the reactor design. But the material specifications are unusually advanced. Are these experimental alloys that have been successfully tested? Sarah maintained her composure despite knowing that Weber had identified one of the sabotage elements. The materials research is classified at the highest levels, but preliminary testing indicates performance characteristics that exceed conventional reactor components by significant margins. Which testing facilities conducted these evaluations? Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, and the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory collaborated on the materials development program. The results are documented in classified reports that aren't included in this data package for security reasons. Elena recognized Sarah's strategy, providing enough technical detail to sound credible, while referencing information that couldn't be immediately verified. The approach might convince Kozlov to accept the data without extensive technical validation. Dr. Weber, Kozlov interjected, can these reactor designs be implemented using currently available materials and technologies? Weber studied the specifications for several more minutes before responding. The basic design principles are sound, but several components require materials or manufacturing techniques that may not be readily available. Implementation would require extensive development work. How extensive? Months or possibly years, depending on access to specialized facilities and expertise. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. Weber's assessment meant that even if Kozlov's clients attempted to use the corrupted designs, they would waste enormous resources on development work that could never succeed due to the fundamental flaws she had introduced. What about weapons-related research? Kozlov asked, moving to the section of the database containing nuclear weapons design information. This data was even more sensitive than the reactor specifications, containing theoretical calculations and engineering principles that could accelerate weapons development programs in countries seeking nuclear capabilities. Sarah had been particularly careful in corrupting these files, introducing errors that would make weapons based on this information either ineffective or dangerous to their operators. The weapons research focuses on miniaturization techniques and enhanced yield efficiency, Sarah explained, accessing files that appeared to contain cutting-edge nuclear weapons technology. The calculations demonstrate methods for achieving greater explosive power using smaller amounts of fissile material. Weber examined the weapons data with increased attention, recognizing information that could be extremely valuable to Kozlov's clients. These designs incorporate principles that weren't widely known during my academic career. The mathematical framework suggests significant advances in weapons physics. Can you verify the accuracy of the calculations? Not without access to specialized modeling software and extensive computational resources. However, the theoretical foundations appear consistent with advanced nuclear weapons research. Elena watched Sarah navigate through the corrupted weapons data with growing admiration for the sophistication of the sabotage. The modifications were subtle enough to avoid detection during preliminary examination, but significant enough to ensure failure if anyone attempted practical implementation. Kozlov checked his watch, noting that 20 minutes of Sarah's verification period had elapsed. Anna, you've demonstrated impressive technical knowledge, but I need assurance that this information is complete as well as accurate. What additional data exists that isn't included in this package? The complete research includes experimental data from actual tests, detailed engineering specifications for manufacturing equipment, and personnel files identifying the scientists involved in these projects, Sarah replied. That information is stored in separate systems that require additional access protocols. Can you provide access to those systems? Yes, but it would require approximately 2 hours to complete the data extraction and verification procedures. Kozlov considered this information while studying Sarah's expression for signs of deception. 2 hours would extend our operational window beyond acceptable risk parameters. External agencies will eventually respond to the communications blackout and coordinate rescue operations. Peterson, who had remained silent during the technical discussions, recognized an opportunity to provide information that might influence Kozlov's decision-making. FBI and military response teams typically require 3 to 4 hours to coordinate operations at facilities with this level of security classification. You probably have additional time if the nuclear research data justifies the risk. Dr. Peterson, you're suggesting that I should extend this operation to acquire additional information? I'm suggesting that incomplete information might be worse than no information. If your clients attempt to implement nuclear technologies based on partial data, the results could be unpredictable. Elena understood Peterson's strategy. Encouraging Kozlov to demand more data would provide additional time for Sarah to implement whatever plan she was developing. But it also increased the risk that the sabotage would be detected during extended examination. Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone in the room. Victor, there's something else you need to know about this data, it's been modified. The statement created immediate tension as Kozlov's expression shifted from cautious satisfaction to cold anger. Weber stepped back from the computer terminal, and the armed operatives raised their weapons slightly. Modified how? Kozlov asked, his voice carrying dangerous undertones. Enhanced, Sarah replied calmly. The original research contained certain limitations and safety restrictions that would have prevented practical implementation. I've removed those restrictions and optimized the designs for maximum effectiveness. Elena stared at Sarah in shock, unable to understand why she would reveal modifications to the data when their survival depended on convincing Kozlov of its authenticity. You're saying that you've improved the nuclear research beyond its original specifications? I'm saying that Anna Volkov's expertise in nuclear physics, combined with 8 years of additional research and development, has resulted in technological capabilities that exceed what the original scientists achieved. Weber moved back to the computer terminal with renewed interest. What kind of enhancements? Efficiency improvements that reduce material requirements while increasing yield, safety modifications that eliminate certain operational risks, and engineering optimizations that simplify manufacturing processes. Kozlov studied Sarah's face intently, searching for signs that might indicate whether her claims were genuine or part of an elaborate deception. Anna, if you've actually enhanced this research, then the value to my clients would be substantially greater than we originally calculated. Which is why I'm willing to provide complete access to all systems and data, including the experimental results and manufacturing specifications I mentioned earlier. In exchange for what? Safe passage out of the United States and a new identity that your network can't track or compromise. Elena realized that Sarah was making an offer that could result in her permanent defection to Kozlov's organization. The prospect of losing Sarah to the same criminal network she had spent 8 years hiding from was almost unbearable. You're proposing to join my organization? Kozlov asked. I'm proposing a business arrangement. You get access to nuclear research. That exceeds anything currently available, and I get protection from the intelligence agencies that have been hunting me since Prague. What makes you think I won't simply take the enhanced data and eliminate you anyway? Because the enhancements I've made require ongoing technical support to implement successfully. Kill me, and your clients will waste years trying to understand modifications that only I can explain. Peterson listened to Sarah's proposal with growing alarm, recognizing that she might actually be considering defection as an alternative to the impossible situation they were facing. Kozlov walked to the laboratory's windows, looking out at the facility grounds while considering Sarah's offer. The proposal had obvious advantages: acquiring enhanced nuclear research, gaining a technical expert with unique capabilities, and resolving the security threat that Sarah represented. But it also carried risks related to trusting someone who had been his adversary for 8 years. Anna, your proposal has merit, but it requires verification that you're genuinely willing to cooperate rather than simply attempting to escape. What kind of verification? You'll provide complete access to the enhanced nuclear research immediately, and you'll remain with my organization long enough to ensure that the data can be successfully implemented. How long? Indefinitely. Sarah nodded slowly, as if accepting. The implications of permanent association with Kozlov's criminal network. I'll need guarantees regarding Dr. Vasquez and the other facility personnel. They'll be released unharmed once the data transfer is complete and verified. Elena found her voice despite the shock of Sarah's apparent defection. Sarah, you can't seriously be considering joining the people who tried to kill you. Elena, they're the only people who can protect me from the intelligence agencies that will never stop hunting me. Sometimes survival requires accepting unpleasant realities. Weber completed his examination of the enhanced nuclear research data and reported his findings to Kozlov. Sir, if these modifications are genuine, then we're looking at technological capabilities that could revolutionize nuclear weapons development. The potential value to our clients would be extraordinary. Can you verify the authenticity of the enhancements? Not without extended analysis, but the theoretical frameworks appear sound. If Dr. Chun is willing to provide technical support during implementation, the risks would be manageable. Kozlov returned to the computer terminal and began reviewing the enhanced data himself. Anna, you'll understand that this arrangement requires trust on both sides. I need assurance that you're genuinely committed to cooperation. What kind of assurance? You'll assist with one additional operation to demonstrate your commitment to our organization. A smaller-scale mission that will test your technical capabilities and loyalty. Sarah agreed with apparent reluctance, knowing that this commitment would cement her defection in the eyes of everyone present. What kind of operation? Details will be provided after we complete tonight's data acquisition and evacuation. For now, I need you to transfer all enhanced research data to our secure storage systems. As Sarah began implementing the final data transfers, Olena realized that she was witnessing the end of Sarah Chun's career as an American intelligence analyst and the beginning of her association with one of the world's most dangerous criminal organizations. But as the data transfer progressed, Sarah activated a hidden subroutine she had embedded in the facility's computer systems 8 years earlier during her initial assignment. The subroutine had been dormant for nearly a decade, waiting for activation through a specific sequence of commands that only she knew. The hidden program began transmitting everything: Kozlov's identity, his associates, their operational methods, their client lists, and most importantly, the complete nuclear research data, including Sarah's sabotage modifications. The transmission went through encrypted channels to intelligence agencies around the world, providing law enforcement with comprehensive evidence of the criminal network's activities. Within minutes of the transmission's completion, tactical response teams that had been staging outside the facility's perimeter began their assault. FBI, military special operations, and international law enforcement agencies coordinated a synchronized operation that would dismantle Kozlov's network globally. As alarms began sounding and tactical teams breached the facility's perimeter, Kozlov realized that he had been outmaneuvered by the same analyst who had eluded him for 8 years. Anna, he said quietly, you never intended to defect. Victor, Sarah replied, removing her wire-rimmed glasses and allowing her true identity to emerge fully. I've been waiting 8 years for you to get close enough for me to finish what we started in Prague. The tactical team secured the laboratory. Within minutes, arresting Kozlov and his operatives while protecting the facility personnel. Sarah's 8-year operation had finally reached its conclusion, providing intelligence agencies with the evidence needed to eliminate one of the world's most dangerous criminal networks. 3 months later, Sarah Chun received a presidential commendation for her service to national security. But more importantly, she received something she had been seeking for 8 years, the freedom to live without looking over her shoulder, knowing that the people who had hunted her were now facing justice in courts around the world. She returned to work at the Brookfield facility, but not as a janitor. Dr. Sarah Chun, senior nuclear security analyst, began her new career protecting the same research she had once hidden while cleaning floors and emptying trash bins. The invisible woman had finally become visible again, and the world was safer because of her patience, dedication, and willingness to sacrifice everything to protect innocent lives from those who would use nuclear technology for profit rather than progress. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.